Royal Television. We inspire.
Hello there, and thank you for joining me on the program Eye on Nigeria, where we discuss policies, conflict and development as it affects Nigeria amongst the Committee of Nations. My name is Femi Tunde Okunla. Wasn't conflict put children in a situation where their rights are violated? Some of those rights include the right to an education, the right to health, the right to be raised in a family environment. The 16th of June every year is recognized by the African Union and other countries as the Day of the African Child. This year, the theme centers around children and how conflict and crisis in Africa affect them. In other words, the theme is conflict and crisis in Africa, protecting the rights of the African child. We discuss the situation and its relativity here in Nigeria. But first, a timeout. Welcome back to the program. This is Eye on Nigeria, where today, in commemoration of this year's Day of the African Child, we take a look at child rights, even in the midst of conflict and crisis situations here in Nigeria. I'm not alone on the show today. I have joining me, I have Antonia Oshiniwe, the director of the Child Protection Network here in Kwara State. Antonia, thank you so much for joining me on the program today.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, good morning. And I also have in the studio, I have a barrister Olasukomi Olorunishola, a legal practitioner. Sir, thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you, Femi.
Let's get started. Anthony, I want to start off with you. You're in the center of all of this as a coordinator of the Child Protection Network. Let's talk about the evaluation of the situation of how conflict and crisis affects the Nigerian child on a large scale here.
Yeah, thank you. Conflict and crisis affecting the Nigerian child. It's actually peculiar to the northern states, basically because of the insurgents that we have happening in the northern state now. Every other state have their peculiarities, but when we're talking about conflict and crisis, we're talking about the northern states. And these children are affected because they are the most vulnerable among all. So that's basically why they are most affected.
All right, in these situations, and what are the impact of this conflict situation? Let's talk about how practically how this affects the children. What do you get to see on the field?
I think the first thing is death. Most of these children lose their lives in terms of the Boko Haram attack. Then those that are able to survive it, they have a psychological problem. Now the lack of education, lack of health facility, even their dignity as children has been infringed upon.
Wow.
Yeah, because when they see these things happen, like people coming to attack their family, their community, even as a child, they lose this self-esteem. They lose this self-esteem. So it's really affecting them psychologically.
Wow, psychologically.
Yeah.
Psychological trauma. Let's take a look at some of the things we have to deal with right here. Again, I have a barrister Olorunishola Olasukomi, a child rights activist. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Let's start off by talking about experiences you've had to deal with as a legal practitioner. Some of those cases get dragged to court as someone who has to defend the rights of the child. How peculiar are these Nigerian instances when we compare them with the global instances we have in other countries?
Thank you very much, Femi. Well, for Nigeria, it's been a bit of a task because we have what we talked about so many times. It's this stigmatization. People don't want to be seen as having gone through what kind of experiences they've gone through. So when you want to prosecute cases, you have difficulty getting your witnesses. You will have difficulty, the person, the individual affected, the victim, might change his or her mind and say, I'm no longer interested in the matter. We've talked about rape cases where the family come back and tell you that, don't worry about the matter. We have decided to to settle it within the family. It's a family matter. It's not a criminal matter again. And I mean, if you want to prosecute a case where you don't have witnesses, how do you prosecute a criminal case without the vital witnesses? So most times such cases just die, and as a result of which allows reoccurrence of such things again.
Let's deviate a little and let's talk about the national legal framework, policy frameworks for the protection and promotion of the rights of children. Are we at a dearth of policies and laws when it comes to the child? Because we have to establish that first and foremost.
Well, thank you. We have quite a number of policies. We have the Child Rights Act, Child Rights Law. It's there. Most times the challenge we have is implementation. Now that brings me to the Child Rights Implementation Committee. We have that, but how many of these people are actually functioning? How many of our states are actually ensuring that these policies are being followed? These laws are being implemented. When you get to a point whereby you want to apply a particular rule, a particular law, you discover that there's some hitches along the way that makes it difficult for you to implement it. We're talking about taking children, for example, taking children off the streets and putting them in schools. Oh. Some parents really want the children to be in school, but they can't afford it. Oh. Education is supposed to be free, but how many of them can actually really afford it? How many states are actually practicing this thing? How many states are actually implementing free education? So it makes it difficult if you come out and say, arrest these kids or arrest the parents, and they tell you they don't have money. I remember about a year or two, about 2 years or so back, we went as, I'm also a member of CPM, we went to a village, and we were trying to get the children from the market, because on market days, the children don't go to school. So we went to the market, and the children ran away. Some of the parents we had the privilege to talk to told us that they had to bring their children to school to make money so that they could pay for the fees. And when we asked them how much, 500 naira, 1,000 naira, but the children had to come to the market and work so they can make money before they go back to school.
All right, this is the program I Am Nigerian. Today, in commemoration of this year's celebration of the Day of the African Child, we're discussing conflict and crisis and how it impacts the children, the situation here in Nigeria, and streamlining some of that conversation to Kwara State. Let's get back to Antonia. Let's talk about statistics here. If we had to do a comparison, say, child-friendly states in Nigeria. Child-friendly states in Nigeria, we have the best states and then we have the worst states. Can we honestly break them down to that here in this conversation?
Not really, because...
Why?
Now, when you're talking about a child-friendly situation, you're talking about a situation where the child has everything working for him or her. So even if there's no insurgency, like in Kwara State, there's no Boko Haram attack, but we have cases of child marriage, we have cases of child labor, and that does not make Kwara State a child-friendly state. So even if there's no insurgency, there are some other states that have their own peculiarities. So in a way, I can't say a state in Nigeria is child-friendly, because every state has its own peculiarity. In some part of the country, we have the case of child witches and others, where they accuse the children of being a witch, probably because the mother died at childbirth. Nobody sees the medical implication there. What they see is, oh, the child is alive, the mother is dead. That means the child is Ogbanje. We have that in some part of the country still operating now. So I can't say in Nigeria we have a child-friendly state.
All right. Again, this is getting more interesting. If we had to take a look at cross-board Africa, right, just say, okay, can we say, sincerely say, because when we talk about a lot of these child issues, the truth is a lot of it, these challenges are faced in African countries. Yeah. Can we honestly say that if we can do the Nigerian evaluation, can we sincerely say across board countries, do we have that, or is this still the same issue where they have relative challenges peculiar to each region?
Thank you, Femi. Like I said, it's a peculiar case in every place you get to. In Nigeria, we'll talk about, for right now, we're talking about Boko Haram. In Kenya, we're talking about female genital mutilation. In South Africa, we're talking about rape. So it goes on and on like that. If you go to the US, you can talk about children being out of school. if it does happen in the US, but it's very, very little, very, very little. But in the US, you have other things that are peculiar to it. The only thing is, you could say one place could be a little bit more child friendly than the other, just a little bit more. But if you weigh the issues that you have on ground, you discover that practically everybody's just at par with each other.
Well, apparently there is a lot to be done right here. We're just trying to compare countries and states here. Again, this is the program Eye on Nigeria. We're talking about the children right here. Let's take a timeout. When we return from that timeout, we'll be talking about statistics. How do we ensure that we safeguard the children's future? Well, it starts off with certain things. We'll find out some more after this timeout. And welcome back to the program Eye on Nigeria. We're talking children and their rights and conflict and crisis situations. That's the focus for this year's Day of the African Child. And I've got guest, a legal practitioner and a coordinator and director of the Child Protection Network here on the program with me. Let's proceed. I want to go on with Antonia. Antonia, let's talk about the role of the government. Yours is a developmental agency. Let's talk about the cooperation between NGOs and the government stepping in to fulfill their mandate as to protecting the rights of children. How well do we seem to be doing that in the country?
Well, for Kwara State where I work, to an extent, we've been getting support from the government that if we go and meet them, the line ministries, like the Ministry of Justice, for instance, we already met with the DPP. So when we have cases, like in the magistrate court, and it's not within their jurisdiction, we need the DPP's advice. These are things that probably ordinarily it should take a couple of weeks or months to get. Since we already have a working relationship with them, when we just write to him with the case file and everything, he gets it for us. And also with the wife of the governor, we've been getting our support in our own little way, although we still ask for more. Like what Barrister said earlier, we need the Child Rights Implementation Committee to be actively involved. Because basically, as the Child Protection Network, what we are supposed to do is to go to the field, get these cases, get them down. The Child Rights Implementation Committee is actually supposed to implement the child rights law depending on the case, because in the Child Rights Implementation Committee, we have different offices. Yeah. We have the legal practitioner there. We have the Ministry of Women Affairs. It's actually meant to be headed by the PANSEP, Ministry of Women Affairs. But in a way, they are actually not. When it was inaugurated initially, I was part of the inauguration. It was effective to a while. But all of a sudden, everybody's just drawing back. So we need our government to actually come up and get this committee to start working. We are actually not meant to implement. We're actually supposed to go to the field and get cases for them. So we need them to start working. So that's one of the places where we really need our government to work on. And the family court, at least after the domestication of the law and efforts of the Child Protection Network and the wife of the governor, the family court is in place in the state now. It holds every Wednesday. It's in state
How
now.
effective is it?
Yes, it's very effective because almost every Wednesday I go for their sitting to witness what is happening there. Although they can actually still build more on it, but at least it's not like before that we don't even have it, that the children are taken to the main court for sitting. They just sit in the judge's office to attend to them. But now we have a particular court that is regarded as a family court in the state. So in a way, the government is helping us, although we would ask for more. But in a way, they are helping us.
All right. And nationally, when we take a look at that nationally, I know nationally it apparently seems to be the issue of the Boko Haram situation, the scorecard.
At the national level, coming to the Child Rights Law, the Child Rights Act was actually Nigeria was a signatory to the Convention on the Right of the Child, and that's why we have a Child Right Act. And the government actually gave all other states for them to go and domesticate it, depending on the peculiarities of their state. So in Abuja, I think the government is actually trying a lot on the issue of the Boko Haram, although more still needs to be done, whether we like it or not. We need more security in our schools. These are things that we cannot do as NGOs, but the government needs to put security, not minding whether it's a government school or not. We need securities in our school, and we really need government to tackle this Boko Haram issue because it's actually affecting our children.
All right, let me come back to the legal practitioner and child rights activist in the studio here. When we talk about protecting the rights of children, we've spoken about policies. Now let's talk about data. Do we have statistical data on the effects of this conflict and crisis on children? Saying, okay, if we have to deal with displaced persons and children in the northern part of the country, do we have figures? And some people would say that's a good place to start.
Thank you very much, Femi. Figures are not readily available for me as we're talking, but in some instances we have figures where you talk about UNICEF and some of these other international organizations. Locally, our facts and figures are difficult to come by.
Why is that so? How is it easier for an international organization to come up with data, and then we can't do that locally?
Well, Femi, that's going to drag me to another issue. But let me put it like this: one of the basic problems we have is that when you're doing this kind of work, I always tell people that you must have a passion for the job. Now, most of the people who want to do these things are out because of the money they can make from it. I was telling my colleague a couple of years back, we gave out some data forms to students at the University of Abuja, wanted to do some collation of some facts and figures, only to discover that rather than them going out to give forms to people and have them fill it so that we could do our analysis as of what they were paid for, some of them just sat in their rooms and they were filling it, gave it to their roommates, fill for me. So, these are part of the issues where we have our people would not want to work. They want to make money, but they don't want to work. The international organizations come, they put the machineries in place to get people to go into the fields, go into the farms and get the details, and then they computerize it.
Wow.
But most times people just want to take their leave, just want to collect money. They're not interested in working, getting it done. So even the figures we have at times, that's one of the issues. And then at times in this peculiarity, like I said, to our country here, people don't want stigmatization.
Wow. So
somebody who has been raped, who escaped it, we want to get your details and be able to put you down because we're collating figures. They'll tell you, don't worry, I wasn't raped. He's my husband, he's my boyfriend, I agreed to it. Well, you said you were raped, so I know, okay, I'm no longer raped.
Wow. So stigma does...
So it does have a lot. It's one of the basic issues we're tackling with.
And how much of this is a drawback? Because again, if you have to work with this and you don't have figures, can we sincerely and genuinely say that we're tackling this if we don't even have the data right?
Well, it's a challenge. What we have resulted to doing is you get your details, your statistics, your data from other people, from other sources. From other sources, then you work based on the little you have been able to collate. And that's what you use to get the job on ground and get it started off with. Rather than otherwise, you're at the dead end.
All right, fans, so let's talk about what needs to be done. What more can be done to protect the children in crisis and conflict zones? Anthony, you said earlier on, these challenges are relative. The challenge in Nigeria seems to be majorly in the northern part of the country, but it doesn't mean we don't have violence and crisis situations with kids in this part of the world. So what can we do? We keep talking about the government, we keep talking about lawmakers, but where should we focus on at the moment?
I think the first thing that should be done is sensitization. Now, there's need for us to go into the rural communities. Fine, we're here in the state capital, we talk about, but those are the rural communities. What do they understand about this thing? There was a time we had to go to a community to find out what has been happening during flood. We found out that the community was withdrawn in giving us information. Now, I so believe that it's because they are not well informed. Probably they are thinking, oh, these people coming to gather information. When we tell them we lose 10 children to flood, they go back to the federal government and tell the government, oh, this community is not, and probably the federal government would evacuate them from the place. They are not well informed. So I think the major thing we should start doing now is sensitization. Let everybody be well informed on the rights of these children. Even the issues of the child labor and stuff like that. Let everybody be well. When there's information, then we can start from that place. Then we can talk about data gathering and stuff. And the major stakeholder in sensitization is still the government. Now, if I go to a community and I go and tell them, don't traffic your child. If you traffic your child, I will sue you. They really tend not to take me serious. But now, when the government...
You have the government backing.
You understand? When I have the government backing, like, oh, it's the government. So the government really needs to support us in this sensitization. And like I said earlier, we really need the Child Rights Implementation Committee to be on ground. The bulk of the work is actually on them.
All right. Well, let's Barrister, let's talk. She cited a couple of areas what needs to be done. She's spoken about the government. The man out there on the street. What exactly is our role? How do we come in place?
Oh well, like you said, basically, if we're going to move an inch or move in any direction, it has to be with the government. It's the government that has to make the funds available, the manpower to get the job done. They have to do a follow-up on all this data capturing and data gathering, which will allow us to be able to now know what kind of actions need to take. A doctor would do a series of tests before he can prescribe drugs for you. So we need to know what's happening, know the peculiarities to the various places, and then action can be taken.
Right, and then that's with the government.
So the government.
Basically.
That's with the government. But we have a lot of NGOs today who are doing great jobs. They're doing great jobs. They go out. They source for funds from themselves or from wherever, and they actually put these funds to what it's meant to be used for. Like we said earlier on, CPN is one of them. It's a coalition of non-governmental agencies working with children. And I know that being a member, having my coordinator here, I know how much of personal finances have been imputed into getting things done. When you talk about government agency, we picked up a child one time, and when we called in the government, they told us that the person who was supposed to minute to the person who will minute to the person who will direct the action to be taken has closed for the day. He's not available. We had to take the child to a private hospital, foot the bills ourselves, just to ensure that the child is taken care of. But this bureaucracy of government and things also affects what actions can be taken, when and how.
All right, well, there's apparently so much to talk about. We've just got 30 minutes on the program. Again, this program has been made to commemorate the Day of the African Child. Well, beyond the conversation right here, what can we do about it? You've heard some part of it, but then again, you and I can also protect these children by ensuring that we create a society that they can leave something sustainable for their generations. But definitely it starts with us. It starts with the government. It starts with you and I, and it's our job to protect these children. A big thank you to my guest in the studio today, Antonia Oshiniwe. Did I pronounce that well?
Yeah, you tried.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much. She's the coordinator of the Child Protection Network, also director of the Fuse Caregivers Initiative. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. And also Barrister Lauren Ishola Lasukomi, child rights activist, legal practitioner. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
My pleasure, Femi. My pleasure.
Today. That's the size of the program. My name is Femi Tunde Okunola, your host. Until the next time when we come up with another discussion on Nigeria still on policies, conflict and development. Do stay safe.